I grew up in a family where expectations were high, especially when it came to the business. It was never just a business, it was the heart and soul of our family, built from the ground up by our father. He poured everything into it, his time, his energy, and his dreams. He was a perfectionist, and he expected the same from his children. I watched as my older sister, the golden child, took on more responsibilities. She was always the one in the spotlight, the one everyone said would take the reins when Dad eventually stepped down. She was sharp, confident, and always the picture of authority. I, on the other hand, was just trying to find my place in a world where I felt overshadowed by her. I worked hard, day in and day out, learning every aspect of the business. I did the grunt work, handling the smallest details, working the long hours, never complaining. I believed that one day my turn would come too. I thought, if I show them that I'm capable, I can prove myself. I had the skills, the vision, and the drive. I was ready. But then the conversation happened. It wasn't something I was prepared for, but I couldn't deny that something had changed. My sister, the one who had always been the heir apparent, sat me down one afternoon. I could see it in her eyes before she even spoke. The self-assuredness, the certainty that I was beneath her. She told me flat out that I wasn't good enough to run the family business. Her words sliced through me like a knife, leaving me speechless. She didn't mince words. She told me I didn't have the right mindset, the right leadership qualities. I had worked beside her for years, pulling my weight, and yet she still couldn't see me as an equal. Her dismissive tone, the way she looked down on me, it was as if all my efforts didn't matter. She said that she was the one who had been chosen, the one who would take over. It was a harsh blow to my pride, and it cut deeper than I was willing to admit. In that moment, I felt everything I had worked for crumble in front of me. I had spent so much time believing that my dedication would speak for itself. I had put in the hours, stayed late, worked weekends, all to prove I had what it took. But my sister had already decided who would be in charge, and it wasn't me. It felt like a slap in the face. I realized as she spoke those words that I had been playing her game, waiting for permission, approval, or validation. And she wasn't going to give it to me. She wasn't even going to give me a chance to prove myself. I stood there, fighting to keep my composure, but inside I was seething. How could she not see what I had to offer? How could she not recognize the fire in me? I had every right to lead the business, but here she was, shutting me down without a second thought. But instead of succumbing to the crushing weight of her words, something inside me shifted. It was a feeling that had been growing ever since that moment of dismissal. A spark of determination ignited in me, and suddenly I knew exactly what I had to do. It wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about proving to myself that I was capable, that I could achieve everything I had dreamed of with or without her approval. I wasn't going to let her words define me. I wasn't going to let her believe she could simply take everything, including my dreams, without facing any challenge. I had been underestimated, and I was ready to show her exactly what I was made of. It wasn't just about my sister anymore, it was about reclaiming my power, it was about taking control of my own future and not waiting for anyone to hand me what I deserved. I was going to make things happen regardless of the obstacles in my path. And the first step was to prove to her, to the world, and most importantly to myself, that I was more than good enough. I had a fire inside me that couldn't be extinguished by anyone's doubts, especially not hers. She had underestimated me, and that, I realized, was going to be her biggest mistake. The tipping point came quickly, and it came when I realized how much I had been holding back. For years, I had accepted my place in the shadows, watching my sister take the spotlight, all while silently working to support her and the business. But now, the reality of what was at stake hit me harder than ever. I had built the knowledge, the skills, and the connections over time, and yet I had never dared to step into the role I knew I was meant for. The time had come for me to break free from the chains of expectation, to stop waiting for the green light and to take what was mine. It wasn't just about revenge or proving my sister wrong, it was about reclaiming my own destiny. I had to stop being the one who was constantly proving my worth to others, to those who were too blinded by their own egos to see what I could bring to the table. I realized that I wasn't going to get what I wanted by playing the game that everyone else expected me to play. I had to make my own rules, carve my own path, and show them that I could succeed on my own terms. At first, I thought about how I could compete with her, how I could do what she had done, only better. But I quickly realized that this wasn't just about me stepping into her shoes, it was about me making my own mark. I didn't need to follow in her footsteps or seek her approval anymore. It was time to build my own legacy. It was time to stop waiting for permission. If they couldn't see my potential, then I would take it, and that's exactly what I did. From that moment on, everything changed. I wasn't going to sit back and let someone else decide my future for me. I was going to make my own moves, and I was going to do it in a way that no one could ignore. It wasn't about playing by their rules anymore. It was about me taking control of my own narrative, and there was no turning back. I had always known that the heart of the business was the clients. Without them, all the hard work, all the systems and strategies we had put in place would mean nothing. My sister had spent years building strong relationships with them, and to be honest, I was never going to outdo her in that department. She had the natural charisma, the confidence, and the authority that made people trust her. But what I had that she didn't was a different kind of strength. I wasn't about flashy gestures or surface-level charm. I was about getting things done, making sure the client's needs were met, and ensuring they felt heard and valued at every step. That's what I realized as I began to consider my next move, that the business wasn't just about the products or services we provided, it was about the trust we built with people. As soon as I accepted the harsh truth that my sister would never give me the recognition I deserved within the family business, the plan began to form in my mind. If I couldn't rely on the company to give me a leadership role, then I had to create my own path. And to do that, I knew I had to go straight to the source, the clients. I had spent years observing my sister, watching how she dealt with them, and though she was effective, she didn't always give them the attention they craved. She was busy, constantly managing bigger picture things, handling the administrative side, dealing with her own priorities. She couldn't always be there for every single client in the way they needed. That's where I could make a difference. I started by reaching out. I began with the clients who had worked with me directly, the ones who had already seen the quality of my work. I made sure to listen to their needs and understand their pain points, something I realized was often overlooked in favor of just pushing forward with the projects. My approach was different. I wasn't just looking to serve them, I was looking to understand them, to create real relationships. I would schedule check-ins with them, not to discuss business, but to get a sense of how they were feeling about everything. I wanted them to know that I genuinely cared about their success, that I wasn't just another person pushing for a sale or signing them onto another contract. I wanted them to feel like their goals were my goals, like they were valued and seen, not just as clients, but as partners. Soon enough, I started noticing a shift. The clients began to ask for me. They started saying things like, "We really want to work with Grace on this project," or "She really understands what we're trying to achieve." I could see the difference. My approach was working, and slowly, I started to build a name for myself within the client base. At first, it was small things, a couple of clients requesting me for their new projects, but it wasn't long before the momentum started to build. As I gained their trust, they began to open up to me about their frustrations with the business, the things they felt were lacking, the things they wished could be improved. I started listening, really listening in a way that my sister hadn't. I didn't just nod and say I'd pass along the feedback, I took action. I began offering solutions that were creative, practical, and aligned with the client's visions. This wasn't about stepping on anyone's toes, it was about building my own foundation within the business based on respect and trust. I didn't need to push my sister out of the picture. All I had to do was show the clients that I was capable of doing what they needed without the typical corporate games or red tape that often slowed everything down. I began to solve problems faster than she could, implementing changes that made the process smoother and the experience more personal. Clients started noticing the difference, and word of mouth spread like wildfire. One by one, the clients who had originally been loyal to my sister began to switch over to me. They didn't want to feel like just another number, another transaction. They wanted someone who saw them as more than just a revenue stream. They wanted someone who cared about their long-term success. I wasn't just looking to secure a deal for the business, I was looking to build something more sustainable, more lasting. I wanted relationships that weren't about the next big sale, but about mutual growth and collaboration. It was exhilarating to watch, but it was also a little surreal. I'd worked so long under the shadow of my sister's success, always striving to prove myself, always trying to stay in the background and support her vision, but now I was carving out my own vision, my own place within the company, and the clients were responding. They weren't just sticking around because of family loyalty, they were sticking around because of the value I brought to the table. It wasn't an immediate takeover. At first, it was slow and steady, the kind of growth that doesn't happen overnight. But as I continued to build trust, as I continued to demonstrate my value, the momentum only grew. Clients started telling their friends, their colleagues, and other businesses in the industry about the fresh perspective I was bringing. Soon enough, I had a reputation of my own. I was no longer just the younger sister. I was becoming a force to be reckoned with, and as much as my sister tried to ignore it, the numbers didn't lie. Her clients were slowly but surely starting to shift their loyalty toward me. I remember the first time it really hit me, the moment I realized just how far I'd come. One of my biggest clients, someone who had been exclusively working with my sister for years, reached out to me directly. They wanted to discuss some new business opportunities, but this time they didn't want to go through my sister, they wanted to work with me. I had to pinch myself. I had been waiting for a moment like this, but I wasn't sure it would ever actually happen. It was a pivotal moment for me. It wasn't just that I had won over one client, it was that I had earned the respect of someone who had been loyal to my sister for so long. And with that, the floodgates opened. More clients followed, more deals came through. I was no longer the underdog. I wasn't chasing after approval anymore. I had become the person clients sought out, and it felt like the business was starting to shift in my favor. I hadn't just taken a few clients, I had started to build my own empire. And this was only the beginning. It wasn't long before the results of my hard work began to show. The clients weren't the only ones who noticed. I could see the shift within the company itself. The employees, the staff who had once seen me as just another sibling working in the background, began to look at me differently. I wasn't the one waiting for approval anymore. I wasn't the quiet one, sitting back and accepting the scraps. I had proven myself not only to the clients, but to everyone who had ever doubted me. It wasn't about trying to win their favor, it was about showing them my worth through action. I didn't just talk the talk, I walked the walk, and I did it in a way that couldn't be ignored. The atmosphere in the office started to change too. I could feel the energy shift as more and more clients came my way. People were watching and they were curious. My sister, of course, saw it as a threat, and while I didn't want to make it personal, I knew that she felt it deep down. She had always been the one in charge, the one with all the power, and here I was, quietly building a new kind of power, not with force, but with trust, reliability, and results. It wasn't the kind of power she had, and it wasn't something she could simply take back. She might have been born into the role, but I had earned mine. One day, things came to a head. I was sitting in a meeting with a few of the senior managers reviewing new projects and upcoming opportunities. My sister walked in, her presence immediately filling the room as it always did. The tension was palpable. She hadn't said much to me directly about the clients I had been working with, but I could see the disapproval in her eyes. She was upset, and I knew exactly why. She had been trying to keep things in her hands, trying to hold onto the reins as tightly as possible, but the reality was different now. More and more, the company was leaning toward me. It wasn't something she could control anymore. In that meeting, the conversation shifted. My sister tried to take control as she always had, but this time I was ready for her. I wasn't going to let her undermine the progress I had made. When she brought up a new proposal for a project, I saw an opportunity to step in. I wasn't going to let her steal the spotlight this time. I spoke up, presenting my own ideas for how we could approach the project. I could see her eyes narrow as she listened, clearly annoyed that I was challenging her. But I didn't back down. I knew the clients better than anyone in the room, I knew what they wanted, and I knew how to deliver. The proposal I suggested was more streamlined, more in line with what the clients had been asking for. I spoke with authority, but also with humility, acknowledging the work we had all done up until that point, but making it clear that things needed to evolve if we were going to stay ahead. The room fell silent for a moment. My sister wasn't used to being challenged like that, especially by me. But the silence spoke volumes. It wasn't a confrontation, not in the way you might think. It was simply a shift in dynamics, a realization that I wasn't the little sister who followed behind her anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with, and it was time for everyone to see that. The rest of the meeting played out differently than I had anticipated. My sister eventually nodded, acknowledging that my proposal had merit, though she tried to maintain her authority over the overall direction of the project. But I could tell that she was rattled. She hadn't expected me to come in and take charge like that, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. She was human, just like the rest of us. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't the only one who could lead this company. After the meeting, I felt a surge of pride. It wasn't about winning a battle. It was about proving to myself that I had the confidence, the knowledge, and the capability to stand up for what I believed in. I didn't need anyone's permission anymore. The feeling of self-assurance that came from speaking my truth, standing my ground, was indescribable. I wasn't doing it for anyone else, I was doing it for me, and that, I realized, was the key. I didn't need to prove anything to my sister or to the people in that room. I only needed to prove it to myself. The ripple effect of that meeting didn't take long to spread. Employees who had once been loyal to my sister began to approach me with questions, seeking my input on their own projects. They saw me differently now. I wasn't the one who took orders, I was the one who gave them. I had become a leader in my own right, not because I was trying to take control from anyone, but because I was willing to lead with integrity and insight. I wasn't just doing what was expected, I was doing what was best for the business, and that made all the difference. It didn't take long before my sister had no choice but to acknowledge the shift in power. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was the same. The clients were coming to me, the employees were turning to me, and the business was thriving under my leadership. The truth was undeniable. The company wasn't just my sister's anymore. It was mine too. And that, more than anything, was the real victory. But despite everything I had achieved, despite all the success I had brought to the business, I couldn't escape the feeling that there was still more to prove. My sister had always been the one everyone expected to lead, and even though I had earned my place, there was a part of me that still felt like I needed to prove to her, to myself, that I could take the company even further. But with every step I took, I knew I was getting closer to that goal. I wasn't just playing the game, I was changing the rules. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I had taken control of my own destiny, and no one was going to take that away from me. The day everything came full circle was the day my sister called me into her office. For weeks, I had felt the growing tension between us, an unspoken rivalry that had been simmering ever since I began building my own reputation with the clients. I'd expected this moment to come, though I hadn't known exactly what to expect. Part of me had braced for conflict, anticipating the moment she would confront me directly, but I was also prepared for it. After everything I had done, everything I had achieved, I wasn't afraid of the confrontation anymore. If anything, I was eager for it. I was ready to face her and make her see the truth, that I wasn't just the younger sibling anymore. I wasn't just tagging along in her shadow, I had grown into my own, and it was time for her to acknowledge that. When I walked into her office, the air was thick with the weight of unspoken words. She didn't look up right away. Instead, she sat behind her desk, her fingers tapping lightly against a folder she had opened but hadn't yet read. She was stalling, trying to gather her thoughts, or maybe trying to figure out what to say to me. I didn't say anything at first. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to speak, but when the silence stretched on, I realized she wasn't going to break it. So I did. "I know why you asked me to come in here," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not going to pretend like I don't know what's been going on. I've seen the way things have been shifting in the office, and I can feel the tension between us, but it's not just the office that's changing, it's the business, and I've been a big part of that." She finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, whether it was pride, resentment, or something else, I couldn't quite tell. I wasn't sure she even knew what she was feeling anymore, but I could tell she was holding something back, and for the first time I didn't feel small in her presence. I felt like I was standing on equal ground, ready to have a real conversation. "Grace," she said, her voice calm but edged with frustration. "I know what you've been doing. You've been going behind my back, reaching out to my clients, taking them from me. You've made things personal, and that's not how we do things here." I let her words hang in the air, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't about to back down. I had earned my place. It wasn't personal, it was just business, and the business needed me. It always had. She just hadn't been able to see that until now. "You're right," I said. "I've been reaching out to your clients, but I'm not taking them from you. They're choosing me, and they're doing it because they feel like I'm actually listening to them, like I'm providing the value that they need. I've built relationships with them, and I've helped them solve problems you weren't able to address." She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand, silencing her. I wasn't finished. "You've built this business, and I respect that, but you've also built walls around yourself and around the way things are done here. You've always been the one in charge, and you've always been the one calling the shots. But the business world is changing. Like, clients don't just want someone who can throw around numbers and tell them what to do. They want someone who understands them, who listens to them, who cares about their needs, and that's what I've been doing." I could see her jaw clenching as I spoke, but I kept going. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. It wasn't about attacking her. It wasn't about putting her down. It was about standing my ground and showing her that I wasn't just some side character in the family business anymore. I was a key player. "You've been so caught up in running things the way you've always known how, but sometimes the way we've always done things isn't the best way," I continued. "I've shown the clients a different side of this business. I've helped them feel seen, heard, and valued in ways that you haven't. And I'm not apologizing for that. I'm not going to step aside just because you're my sister. I've earned my place here, and I'm going to keep fighting for it." There was a long silence after I finished speaking. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, and for the first time, she didn't look at me with anger or dismissiveness. She looked at me with something else, something that resembled respect. "I never thought you'd go this far," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I thought you'd just sit there and wait for me to give you a chance, but you didn't. You went after it on your own. You did it without me." Her words stung a little, but they weren't meant to hurt me. They were a realization, one that had been a long time coming. She had underestimated me for so long, and now she was finally seeing me for who I really was, someone who could stand on her own, someone who didn't need to wait for permission. I didn't do it without you, I said, leaning in a little, my voice soft but firm. I did it despite you because you didn't see me, you didn't see my potential, and you didn't see the way I could help this business grow. But that's okay because now I'm making my own path and I'm not going to wait for you to give me permission anymore. There was a long pause before she responded, and when she did, her tone had softened. I don't know how to do this, Grace. I've always been the one leading. I've always been the one with the vision, but maybe I've been blind to what you can bring to the table. Maybe I've been so focused on my own way of doing things that I've overlooked the fact that you've been right here all along. Her words weren't an apology, but they didn't need to be. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for acknowledgement, and I had it. For the first time, I felt like she saw me, not as a little sister, but as a leader in my own right. And that was enough for me.
Grace, I don't know what comes next, she said, looking me in the eyes, but maybe we can figure it out together. I nodded. Maybe we can.
We didn't come to some grand resolution in that moment, but what mattered was that we had finally opened the door to a new way of working together, one that recognized both of our strengths and allowed us to collaborate, not compete. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going anywhere. I had proven myself, and now I had the chance to show the world just what I was capable of. The future of the business was in my hands just as much as it was in hers, and together we would make it thrive.